All right, please be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, as I mentioned to you, we were going to do something a little unusual, and we have, the defense has an expert witness that they're going to call, obviously out of order because the state has not concluded its proof. And the reason is the witness is from East Tennessee. He can only be here a certain period of time, and so we're going to have him testify now. And just keep in mind that this is defense proof and not state proof, okay? And we will call him, and I'm going to ask the state if they would stipulate that Dr. Lipman is a expert in neuropharmacology.
We will, Your Honor. Thanks for letting us know. I think he needs to head back to East Tennessee.
Okay, all right. All right, come up, Dr. Lipman.
Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Would you state your name for the record, please?
Jonathan Joseph Lipman.
And Dr. Lipman, could you tell us about your education and training experience, please?
Yes, I'm British originally, so my education is British, which differs somewhat from the American.
Okay, make sure you speak to the mic because the court reporter may not pick up everything.
I was saying that my education is British originally. I did my advanced level certificates of education at Kitson College of Science in Leeds in England. I went on to do my professional degree at the Hatfield Polytechnic near Hertfordshire. Which is near London. I did my doctorate in neuropharmacology at the University of Wales in Cardiff. My externship was served at the National Hospital for Nervous Diseases in Queen's Square, London. And I went on to do a postdoc here in the States at the University of Tennessee Center for the Health Sciences. This was a joint appointment between the UT CHS Biochemistry Department, UT CHS Anesthesiology, and the Faculty Medical Practice Pain Clinic. I went on from there to Vanderbilt for 10 years as a research assistant professor in departments of medicine and surgery, doing basically drug research and brain research before going on to industry. Now, over those years, I gained additional qualifications and certifications, including board certification by the American Board of Forensic Examiners, the American Board of Disability Analysts, and the American Board of Psychological Specialties in 2 sub-boards, one being substance abuse and the other being psychopharmacology. Most recently, I was elected a Fellow of the Royal Society of Medicine. So my education continues. It doesn't, it's going on.
And can you talk about your where you are currently employed and what you currently do?
I have an affiliation with the Quillen College of Medicine. I'm a research associate professor in the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Science at East Tennessee State University. And I serve as a forensic consultant for neuroscience consulting and for forensic associates, which is based at the ETSU Innovation Lab in Johnson City.
Okay. And explain your expertise in pharmacology and neuropharmacology and how it is applied.
Right. Pharmacology is that field that deals with how drugs work. We are...
We did, and we can move on, get right to the substance of the testimony.
Well, I believe it's, at this point, beneficial to explain what pharmacology and neuropharmacology is, Your Honor. I don't think we can just assume everyone.
Okay, well, you can define pharmacology, neuropharmacology.
Can you define neuropharmacology and how it is applied?
Yes. Neuropharmacology is that division of pharmacology which deals with the effects of drugs on nerve, brain, and behavior. These can be therapeutic drugs, which, for instance, I was developing in Chicago for a decade, or they can be drugs of abuse, recreational drugs, or they can be poisons. Not all drugs act on nerve, but neuropharmacology focuses more particularly on those.
Okay. Let me ask you, do you have a CV? Let me ask you, the state's been provided his CV, and I just want to have him identify that and mark that as the next exhibit and move it into evidence.
Yes, this dated March of this year is, I think, the most recent one.
Okay.
All right, that'll be number 32, I believe.
Okay. What is a board-certified forensic examiner, please?
A forensic examiner is an individual who has had particular training and obtained qualification in the application of their professional expertise to the law. And forensic examiners can come in a number of different professions. Mine is in pharmacology.
Okay. And could you define pharmacokinetics and what that is and how that applies?
Pharmacokinetics is a technique and a discipline within pharmacology which addresses the movement of drugs through the different tissues of the body, from absorption to distribution to metabolism to elimination. And the measurement of the blood and tissue levels of drugs is a dynamic process, and so we call the field pharmacokinetics.
And is that a subfield of your expertise?
Certainly, yes.
Okay. All right. And Dr. Lippman, my office contacted you and provided you certain information regarding Mr. Cory Batey and his requesting that you determine his blood alcohol level over a specific period of time. Do you recall that?
I do, yes.
Okay. And you created a report, did you not?
I did, originally in 2014 and revised most recently last week.
Okay. And what was the revision from, please?
I discovered a small calculation error in the numbers of the original report, and I took the opportunity, therefore, to refresh the numbers more accurately.
Okay. And so the report you have today is the corrected report, is it not?
Yes, the difference was not large, but it annoyed me, and so I corrected it.
Okay. All right. Now, did it substantially change your findings in any way?
No.
Right. You were provided certain information about Mr. Batey and the alcohol he consumed, were you not?
I was, sir.
Okay. And you have provided that information in your report, have you not?
I have.
Okay. And let me ask you if we can put up on the, it's not on my screen.
It's still.
Oh, excellent. Okay. Ask you if you can identify what this document is, please.
The information on it is some of the information that I was provided when asked to calculate what the likely intoxication level was of Cory Batey.
Okay. And can you describe what, and tell the jury about what you were provided?
That he was then 19 years old, that he was 5'11", that at the time he weighed 205 to 210 pounds, and that on the night in question he drank, beginning at 11:30, shots of Honey Jack made by Jack Daniels, and continued for the next 35 minutes. He consumed 8 to 10 single shots of this product, Honey Jack. And he arrived at a party around 12:15 p.m. and drank 3 to 6 single shots of vodka. Around 1:30 a.m. he drank 3 to 6 Lime-A-Ritas made by Bud Light. These are 12-ounce bottles. And his last drink was around 2 a.m. I was asked to calculate what his blood alcohol concentration was at 2:30 a.m. and 3:10 a.m.
Okay. And did you have to make certain assumptions? Did you have to make certain assumptions about the information you were provided and Mr. Batey?
I did. First of all, the information I was given had a range in it. For instance, beginning at 11:30, he consumed 8 to 10 single shots of Honey Jack. Well, those are different. There is a lower case for 8 and a higher case for 10. And you can't ignore that variability. Likewise, at the party, he drank 3 to 6 single shots of vodka, and around 1:30 a.m. he drank 3 to 6 Lime-A-Ritas. So the information that I was given was of a type that had an uncertainty in it. There was a lower level of consumption and there was a higher level of consumption. So in order to calculate what the blood alcohol concentration was, I was going to have to do it for the two different cases, one being assuming the least number and one being assuming the most number. In addition, I did not have adequate information sufficient to judge whether his history of alcohol consumption would have changed his metabolism and his clearance. And this is important because experienced alcohol drinkers clear alcohol more quickly, and the blood level that they reach is lower for the same amount of alcohol that a naive person would drink. So it makes a difference as to whether a person is an experienced drinker or an inexperienced drinker. And I was told that he was not an alcoholic, which would be a third category that has to be taken into account in the calculation. But nevertheless, I had the variability to account for, not only due to the lower limit of drinks and the higher limit of drinks, but the two different cases of whether he was a normal metabolizer and clearer or an experienced alcohol drinker. Information I didn't have. So I had to be able to give the calculation, the answer, for the different cases that would apply.
Okay. And were certain assumptions made with regard to the size of a shot or the various different types of alcohol?
Yes.
And are those recorded in your report?
They are, sir.
Okay. If I may just ask you to ask you if this is. Can that go up?
These are the assumptions that went into the calculation. That Honey Jack is 35% alcohol, which I found out from the manufacturer, and that a Lime-A-Rita is 8% alcohol, and that vodka, which is 80 proof, that's 40% alcohol. and that the statutory shot of liquor is 1.5 ounces. So I was able to define what I would use as the assumptions for the low dose and the high dose conditions. And those are given on the screen in front of you. I won't actually repeat again all the detail, but the low dose condition assumes 8 honey jacks, 3 shots of vodka, and 3 bottles of Lime-A-Rita. The high dose assumes 10 honey jacks, 6 shots of vodka, and 6 bottles of Lime-A-Rita.
Okay. And is this a significance to the elimination range in 8 or 9?
There is, because it's the difference between, in part, it's the difference between what an alcohol-naive person would eliminate at and what an experienced person would eliminate alcohol at. Now, there is an additional variable that I had to bring to the calculation, which will be more clear when I show you what I calculated the blood alcohol concentrations as. But that is the method that you use to calculate it. There are a number of valid ways of doing the calculation. None of them are wrong. Some are more right than others. And in this case, I did it using 2 different methods. So it gives us another range of what is likely, and therefore increases our confidence that the range provided is correct.
Okay. And I believe in your original report, you just used one of the formula methods, is that right?
Actually, no. What I did was I used all of the formula methods. There are 6 of them. And I took the average so that it was representative of all of the correct ways of doing it, but it was the average of all of the correct ways. In order to meet a different criterion from a report that I had seen by another expert who used the Widmark method, that was one of the 6 that goes into the average. I separated out the Widmark method calculations as well as showing what the average is for all the methods. So it's not actually different, it's just separated out to be seen on its own.
Okay. But before I ask you to move on to the specific charts, Dr. Lippman, defining an ounce or a shot, how did you, in the assumptions you were making, how did you define, like, for instance, what a shot was since there was drinking from the bottle?
It's the most parsimonious way I could do it. I looked at what an official shot measure is.
Okay.
Now, if they drank more than what an official shot measure was, then I've underestimated the blood alcohol concentration. But I cannot know what a person means by a shot other than what the official shot concentration volume is. And in Tennessee, it's 1.5 ounces. It actually varies in the different states. It can be as much as 3, in fact, in some places. But here, if this is what people are used to and what they would call a shot, it would be 1.5 ounces.
Okay. All right. Let me ask you, and I want to let you know, Dr. Lippman, that with Judge Watkins' new system here, one can actually write on the teleprompter, or is that right, Judge? He can, the monitor? Yes. He can make marks on it.
Ah, yes.
If you need to,
How do you make it go
and I might,
away?
yes.
Well, there's a clear button, I think, over PS.
Okay. All right. So, are these charts, the charts you have identified in your report?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
These contain the results of my calculations for the different conditions covered by the assumptions.
Okay. So can you explain I believe you talked about the two different formulas, the average all formula method and the Widmark formula. I've circled those. Is that what you were referring to as the two different formula methods used?
Yes, the top one, the average all formula method, is actually the average of 6 methods used, of which one is the Widmark. The bottom one is just the Widmark on its own.
Okay.
You can see that there are some small differences.
All right, and I'm going to clear that and ask you to explain to the jury the significance of these charts, low dose, high dose, and the different times.
Sure. The lower number of drinks taken versus the higher number of drinks taken is what I refer to as low dose and high dose. If you assume that he is not a very experienced drinker, then his elimination rate is going to be a little lower. And at 2:30 in the morning, his blood alcohol concentration is going to be 0.23. But at the higher concentration, the higher dose, it could be as high as 0.4. At 3:10 a.m., since he has stopped drinking at that point by report, it would have reduced. And with the low dose assumptions, it would be 0.226 grams percent. At the high dose assumptions, it would be 0.41. Now, if you assume that he is an experienced alcohol drinker, and he's only 19, and I don't know how much time he's had to be experienced, so the truth is probably somewhere between these numbers. But if you assume that he's an experienced alcohol drinker, at the low dose, his blood alcohol concentration would be 0.216, which is lower than for a normal, because of course an experienced drinker clears it faster. And at the high dose, it would be 0.398, almost 0.4. At 3:10 in the morning, it would have reduced slightly, would have reduced more than at the normal kinetics. It would have reduced to 0.205 at the low dose and 0.395. Now, when you extract out the Widmark formula from the average all formula, you get numbers that are slightly smaller. But the bottom line is the same. Using the normal kinetics, at 2:30 his blood alcohol concentration would have been between 0.186 and 0.34 at 2:30. And if he is an experienced alcohol drinker, then he would have cleared it a little faster, and so it would be between 0.17 and 0.32. At 3:10 in the morning, using the Widmark formula, it would be between, with the low dose, 0.182 and with the high dose, 0.34. If he's experienced, it would be 0.163 to 0.32. So these numbers are all bracketing a range. And these are the reasons for the range. But the bottom line is that it's not going to be below 0.186. And it's not going to be above 0.4. And it could be lower than 0.4 if he is an experienced drinker, but it couldn't be lower than 0.186. So it provides the range of what is the most likely blood alcohol concentration at those two times, using all of the possible ways that can be used to calculate these and allowing for the uncertainty of the dose.
And let me ask you, Dr. Lippman, are the conclusions you've explained to the jury today offered within a reasonable degree of forensic neuropharmacological certainty?
Yes, they are. They're using well-accepted pharmacokinetic principles.
Okay. Dr. Lippman, I want to ask you now, I'm going to remove this and clear this, and we can obviously refer back to it if we need to. Tell the jury what the toxic effects of alcohol are. with behaviors?
It depends on the dose. The numbers that we have just been reviewing are between twice the DUI level and 5 times the DUI level. Even the lower level of that is well drunk. The effect of alcohol on the brain and on behavior is a function in part of dose, the amount that's in your blood, at least, that is bathing your brain. The lower dose effects affect the most vulnerable parts of the brain, which are the latest to develop. They are the ones that are not developed in childhood, the ones we develop as we go through adolescence. These are the frontal lobes. And these are the first brain areas to be affected as the blood alcohol level rises. This has the effect of producing disinhibition, and of course that is why people drink socially, because it gives them it relieves the inhibition of social anxiety. At the higher levels, it starts to affect the actual substrates of anxiety in the hippocampus and the frontocortical limbic circuits. And this is where you start to inhibit the things that you actually should be anxious about, but aren't, because the alcohol is inhibiting that. This is when behavior starts to become improper, and people do things that are ill-advised. As the dose gets even higher, it will start to affect the amygdala and the hippocampus, which is involved in memory. And at this point, we're starting to affect some very basic brain functions that have consequences that last beyond the alcohol drinking binge. And at even higher levels, this is a picture of the areas I was talking about. At even high, these are the frontal lobes, the ones that alcohol first affects, the ones that, I guess in a sense, we intentionally drink for social purposes to inhibit those, because now we have the courage to talk to strangers. And if it ended there, that would be fine. But as the brain, the older parts of the brain are here, and the younger parts of the brain, the last to develop in adolescence, early 20s, are at the front. Alcohol, as the dose rises, essentially works back down that anatomical course. When it is affecting the hippocampus, which is this area in the limbic system here. There's one on each side. It's called hippocampus because it's shaped like a seahorse. It's starting to affect memory. And things that you are doing under the influence of a dose that is acting on the hippocampus to inhibit, such things will not be remembered later. They are not remembered later because this is the area of the brain where memories are formed. Things that you are keeping in working memory as they are occurring have to be laid down in long-term storage for you to access them tomorrow and the day after. The effect of very high doses of alcohol is to prevent that process so that the memories do not get laid down and you do not have a memory for it later. Now that is a high dose phenomenon acting at lower brain areas. So I contrast that with the initial effects that are by the lower doses that are at the frontal lobes. At even higher doses still, it starts to affect vestibular function. And this is where you will see that people's eyes, their vision is crossed, or they have nystagmus, cross-eyed, and they will have difficulty with balance, because the part of the brain responsible for interpreting what is horizontal and what isn't is being poisoned. At this point, watching a drunk just standing still, you'll see him weaving, and he will get an idea of what is horizontal by just touching something, anything at all, really, to help. Likewise, when this is affecting the visual control, the nystagmus. You can bring things back into focus by closing one eye. But these are very, very high dose effects. These are not the sort of effects that are used in recreational beverages over dinner or at a bar. But when they start to affect the lower brainstem areas, these vegetative functions, that's where you're getting into dangerous territory. And if the dose gets even higher still, not a lot higher than I calculated actually for the drug-naive case, then it affects respiration and you can die. Typically we quote a level of 0.5 as lethal. In truth, chronic alcoholics can survive higher doses, higher blood alcohol levels than that, though we have no evidence that this is a chronic alcoholic case. But at that point, you have affected the entire circuit from the low to the high, and you're affecting the cerebellum, and you're affecting the medulla, and you are affecting balance and vision and coordination.
Okay. And how are the frontal lobes with regard, tell us what injudicious behavior is. And
the frontal lobes are, as I said, the ones that are developed latest. They are where we get our restraint, our inhibition from, our judgment, our executive functions, as we say in neuropsychological terms. These functions are eroded by alcohol or anything that acts in that way. And the reason we know that is that we know how alcohol acts on the brain from a neurochemical point of view. It facilitates a neurotransmitter called GABA, gamma-aminobutyric acid, which is widely distributed throughout the brain. Alcohol is not the only drug that does this. So do the benzodiazepines, Valium, Xanax, Ativan, lorazepam. They do exactly the same thing. And we use those medically, and we use them in surgery. We know how alcohol works on the frontal lobes and the hippocampal areas and the circuits in between. So when the frontal lobes are inhibited, we can behave impulsively and perseveratively.
You're going to have to define that second word for me.
Okay. It has a special tip on it. Okay. Sorry, what was the question?
You were mentioning that that the toxic ingestion can creates impulsivity.
Impulsivity or perseveration, yes.
Yes.
You get these this syndrome, this frontal dysexecutive syndrome in people who have brain damage, anoxic brain damage. But you can also get it, at least for a few hours, with alcohol poisoning. Impulsive behavior is behavior that is unrestrained by your normal inhibitory processes, doing silly things, jackass things, things that you wouldn't do in your right condition, in which you do it without thinking, or at least without the sensor of your frontal lobes exerting the necessary controls. Perseveration is part of the same phenomenon. It is where you continue to do something even after you have realized that you shouldn't be doing it. And the example I used to use, and you can tell I'm old, it's because my car now doesn't have an ignition key to get in, you just push a button. However, I used to use the example of the igniosecond because I have experienced that. The igniosecond, I would say, which is an example of a perseveration, is that moment when you are closing the car door and you are realizing that you are locking your car keys inside, but you close it anyway. There is that moment when, if you could stop, you would, but you close it anyway. That is a perseveration. And of course, that's a very minor example, but in the condition of frontal lobe inhibition, you're in that condition the whole time. And it's not a happy place to be. So those are two of the things that the frontal lobes exert on judgment, one being impulsivity and the other one being perseveration.
Good. And can you explain the effects of alcohol on memory consolidation?
Yes. I had touched on it earlier in that as you are doing things, as you are seeing things and speaking and acting, you are forming a working memory of what you are doing. In the normal course of everyday experience, those memories will spool into long-term memory so that when I ask you about this tomorrow, you will remember, in essence, with some detail, what has happened. For that to happen, the memory has to be consolidated, which is a chemical process, from short to long-term memory. Alcohol inhibits that consolidation so that the memory is not laid down in long-term memory, and a person who is in that condition, who will later be amnestic for the memory, may not appear to you to be as impaired as you will realize the next day when you ask them about what you were talking about. Because when they are in that condition, it is an organic brain disorder, they will not be able to remember it tomorrow. Now, of course, to them, because the memory has not been laid down, it's just like a period of time that is missing, and that's where the word blackout comes from. But that's only a word that you would use the next day, because at the time you are not unconscious, you are not flat out. You are, in fact, moving and talking and doing things, but memories are not getting laid down. You do not later recall it. And so the blackout is distinct from unconsciousness. It's unfortunately common in alcoholics, particularly, where the phenomenon of confabulation intervenes, and that is that people who have these blackouts, when they struggle to remember something that they're having difficulty, the brain, unfortunately or fortunately, will create a false memory to fill in the gap, to fill in the lacuna. It'll be a memory of something that you likely could have done or would have done or should have done or had done in the past, and this satisfies and you move on. But the truth is, that's not what happened. You don't remember what happened. And that's where blackouts come from. They come from the effect of the drug on the brain. And alcohol does it for the same reason that the benzodiazepines do it. They're GABA agonists. And that's why, if you've ever had a colonoscopy, that's why we give you what we call conscious sedation. If you've had this experience of conscious sedation in the colonoscopy suite, you will tell me that you do not remember the colonoscopy. Actually, you were awake, you were talking, probably babbling, probably disclosing things you shouldn't, but we've heard that all before, and you don't remember any of it. So it seems like a period of blackness, a blackout, if you like. It seems that perhaps you must have been unconscious, but an observer will see that although you were very, very altered, you were not actually unconscious. And that's what a blackout is.
Good. And that can be caused by toxic amounts or high amounts of alcohol?
Yes, alcohol or the barbiturates or the benzodiazepines.
Okay. And so is it... So it is possible for a person to be in a state of alcoholic blackout and still be able to perform tasks. Is that right?
Oh, yes.
So hypothetically, one could be in a blackout and one could exit one room and walk out into the hallway and not remember anything?
Yeah, the blackout is normally how an individual describes a period of amnesia for a time when observers saw them walking, talking, behaving, generally very injudiciously, perhaps recklessly, and they don't remember it. And that's called a blackout. A blackout does not refer to a period of unconsciousness.
And that could include, hypothetically, finding your way back to your room or making phone calls or even taking a shower?
Yes, in that condition where you are so affected that you will not be remembering it the next day, you are able to do routine tasks. You may even be able, for instance, to drive your way home if it's a frequent route. You will certainly get lost if it's not. You can do routine things relatively easily because your working memory is functioning. But you are so deeply affected that you are not in your normal state of mind, and you won't be remembering it the next day.
Okay. What is chemical submission?
It's a state that we associate with, nowadays we associate with benzodiazepine drugs when we're using them for interrogation or for subjugating someone, particularly illegally, as in a date rape drug. Or if we are, as I said, interrogating them, or using them for therapeutic hypnotic processes. Under the influence of a GABA agonist drug, people become compliant and more easily manipulable than they would in everyday life. And this is really where the date rape phenomenon comes from, because people who are very typically, they will take a dose of a Rohypnol or a Lunesta. Sometimes now it's Ambien. Often it's Xanax mixed with alcohol. And they will do absolutely ridiculous things. Their friends will see them doing it. They will end up going home with someone, and the next day will wake up not knowing where they are. But the condition that they are in, both of them, in the examples I give, is one of compliance and manipulable suggestibility, and we call it chemical submission.
Can alcohol create a state of chemical submission?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, which is, I think, why it's popular in bars, to be frank.
What type of physical characteristics would you expect? Or let me ask you this first. You have studied the effects of high levels of alcohol on individuals, have you not?
Yes, both acute and chronic.
Okay. And are you able to identify and explain characteristics of individuals under the influence of alcohol, high doses of alcohol?
Yes, though there is some overlap with their behavior under the influence of benzodiazepines for the same reason that I described earlier. The mechanism is the same.
And based upon your findings and the chart that we showed to the jury, would you agree that Mr. Batey's ability to act in an intentional and knowing fashion at the times of these events was grossly impaired as the result of alcohol?
Yes, within the range of alcohol concentrations calculated, he would certainly be grossly impaired.
If I can, Your Honor, as far as his report, I need to have him identify that and mark that, please. And the state has been provided a copy of that. If we can ask him to identify that.
You might want to put all three of his reports in.
I only have 2, so if you have 3, that's fine.
I only have 2, Your Honor. Actually, I gave Your Honor my copy of the one from November of 2014. Yeah, we'll just.
He has 2. The state is saying there are 3 reports.
November 5th, one November 21st, and then the one that was done this weekend.
Sorry, would you say that again? Yes, I don't have the 5th in front of me.
One
But
21st, and then the one that was done this weekend.
yes, but I don't have in front of me the one from the 5th. I have the 21st of November and the corrected one. Okay, I'm not sure what the difference is between the 5th and the 21st, but I identify them as being mine. They are of 2014.
Okay. Your Honor, then.
Okay, that'll be a collective exhibit number 33.
Yes, Your Honor. And I believe that's all the questions I have at this time, Your Honor.
Good afternoon, Dr. Lippman.
Good afternoon, sir.
And we've just been talking about your reports. The original one was November 5th, 2014, and then you did another one on the 21st. Is that right?
Apparently, that was a long time ago.
Okay. And you testified earlier, I think, that there was a problem with those 2 reports when you started reviewing them, that you'd used the wrong calculation on one situation.
There was a very tiny difference in the result. I think if I could have them back, I could point them out to you. But it was in the 3rd decimal place of the blood alcohol concentration. I think 0.223 versus 0.220. It was enough for me to want to correct it.
Okay. So there was a small
It made
error.
no substantial difference.
So there was a small error in your calculations, and you corrected it this weekend, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you got that report to us, I think, Sunday night, approximately Sunday afternoon.
As soon as I wrote it.
And in this case, there were really no scientific tests you could look at as far as Mr. Batey, like blood tests, alcohol, breath tests, or anything like that that would...
Well, that would be a review of video of his behavior,
Okay.
such as anything that showed that he was discoordinated.
You didn't have any scientific tests or anything when you did your reports, is that correct?
Not on Sunday, no.
The only thing you had was the information been provided you by who? Who gave you this?
Dr. Walker and the attorneys. Dr. Walker was the psychologist that reviewed him in 2014, I think.
So was it Dr. Walker or the attorney that gave you the information about how much he'd had to drink, if you recall?
I can't now recall which part came from which person.
Could it have been a combination of both of them telling you different things?
It was consistent with what they both told me.
So obviously your findings are based on what information you were given at that time.
Correct.
By either the attorney or the psychologist, right?
Yes.
And if that... And if that information is inaccurate, then your findings would be scientifically inaccurate. Is that correct?
The numbers would be
Yes.
would not be correct. Yes,
The scientist is only as good as the data.
that's correct.
Yes. Garbage in, garbage out kind of thing.
Absolutely.
So let's look at the information a little bit that you were given. Let's see. You say that the last drink was approximately 2 a.m. Is that correct?
That's what I was asked to assume in the purpose of my calculations. I, of course, have no independent knowledge of that.
Let me hand you these transcripts of previous hearing of this court where Mr. Batey testified.
This is going to take some hours.
No, you're not going to read all of it. I'll tell you. Here we go. If you could, so it was at 2 a.m. that Mr. Batey supposedly had his last drink. Is that correct?
I was asked to assume that the last drink was at 2 a.m. That's all I can tell you.
Okay, could you turn to page 1804 would be in volume 13. There's two volumes because his testimony went into two different volumes, but 13.
Is it where that yellow tab is?
No, that's another issue. I think.
Okay, I've turned to page 1804.
1804. Do you see lines 8 through 11 there?
Yes. Well, 2 through 11, yes.
Okay.
You asked me to read it. It says, actually, you stopped drinking by your own account around 2 o'clock in the morning. And he says, I don't remember specific times. And then it goes on to say that it was after he met with Mr. Royster.
Oh, I don't remember specific times. Then he says, would you read the next line?
Question, don't remember? So, but here you are saying that your last drink would have been in the parking lot, correct? Answer, that's correct.
Okay. So he's testifying under oath his last drink was in the parking lot. Is that correct?
That's what it says here.
Okay. And now, if you would, turn to volume 12, I think page 1794. 94. On line 7, if you would.
Okay.
And could you read that particular line 7 through line 11, please?
I don't recall a specific time, but an estimate maybe. We stayed there 40 minutes, so maybe closer to 1 a.m., somewhere around there.
And he's referring to when he left the parking lot, correct?
I have no clue. I don't have
Well, if you look,
context.
if you'd read the right line, line 7 above it, look, read that, please.
Okay, going back for context, he's talking about drinking Lime-A-Ritas.
No, I'm talking about line 7, not going back for context. The question, do you recall approximately what time you left the parking lot party? That's the question.
Yes.
I don't recall a specific time, but estimate maybe we stayed there 40 minutes and maybe closer to 1 a.m. Is that correct?
Comma somewhere around there, yes.
Okay. So that would indicate under oath, Mr. Batey is saying he left more closer to 1 a.m. than 2. Would you agree with that?
Objection, Your Honor, that's not what he said. The answer was, I don't recall a specific time.
He said it's close to 1 a.m., Your Honor, please. You can.
Well, I mean, transcript says what it says.
It says what it says.
Yeah. It says 1 a.m., does it not?
It says he doesn't remember a specific time. The questioner actually says that.
Yeah, the questioner says that, but he says it's around 1 a.m., did he not? That's not around 2 a.m., he says 1 a.m., does he not?
That's what I read.
Okay. And since we're doing...
I'm going to raise an objection here. I understand he's giving him this to read from, and the problem I have with this is that he didn't base his report that's entered into evidence off of Mr. Batey's prior hearing testimony. He never based it off of that. He based it off of Dr. Walker's other report and whatnot and other information. But he's having him read this. And
Let me respond. The door was open to this line of questioning by what was given to Dr. Lippman. The door was open.
All we're doing is impeaching the information that was given to him by his attorney. Connor, please. So, saying 1 a.m. versus 2 a.m., that would change your numbers slightly, would it not, because of dissipation of alcohol in the blood system?
Yes. It would change it less for the normal alcohol kinetics than for the high
Okay. But it would change.
experienced.
Okay.
A little bit.
Now, your report says, I think here, 8 to 10 shots of honey jack, is that right?
I would have to go back to it.
That was your assumption?
Yes, the low dose condition assumed 8, the high dose assumed 10.
Okay. And you talked about, you said something about a statute saying 1.5 ounces of a shot.
You'd be going back to 2014 when I looked it up.
Yes. And what statute is that defines a shot as 1.5 ounces?
I don't know now.
You don't know what statute you looked at?
No.
Okay.
Possibly a bartender's manual for Tennessee.
Okay, so that would be, if you're in a bar and they're pouring you a shot glass, it would be 1.5 ounces. That's what you believe you looked up?
Yes.
And of course, where I come from at the plateau, there's a difference in a shot and a swig. Someone passes around a bottle, you don't pour out 1.5 ounces. You may take a swig. You may take a drink, shot, whatever you want to call it. But scientifically, there's no way that everybody takes a drink out of a bottle, drinks 1.5 ounces, is there?
Correct.
It could have been 0.5 ounce.
That would be a really tiny volume, but yes.
Could be 3 ounces. Like you
Yes.
said, maybe in Wales it might be 5 ounces.
Right.
Different drinks for different folks, I guess.
Yes.
But there's no way scientifically that you can say 1.5 ounces per drink, is there?
I don't know the size of his mouth or what he was consuming.
Exactly.
No. But I described what I used.
Okay. If you could you turn to page 1791 in volume 12?
What was that page again?
1791.
Okay.
And at the top of the page, the question says, how many shots of honey jack do you believe you had in Mr. Banks and Mr. McKenzie's room? You see what his response was?
He says, I was say between 6 to 8 approximately.
Okay. So in your report, it's 8 to 10, is that correct?
That was what I was, yes, those were the parameters I was given.
Okay.
And I suppose 6 to 8 is approximately that.
It could be approximately 4 to 6, but the bottom line is you used your low parameter was an 8 when it should have been a 6 according to Mr. Batey, and your high parameter was a 10, which it should have been an 8 according to Mr. Batey.
It is what it is.
Okay. So that would change your findings, would it not?
It would, for one of the parameters, yes.
Okay. Now also, let's see, in your report, I think you wrote and you say at 1:30 a.m. he drank 3 to 6 Lime-A-Ritas in 12-ounce bottles. Is that correct?
Where are you reading from?
Your report.
Which page?
Well, I was just reading from this that they just handed me, but it says 6 to 12 ounces, 8% Lime-A-Rita consumed, 130, 135, 140, 145, 152. You got that you just put up on the board? It's in your report also, I think.
Okay.
I think it's on page 3 in your new report.
Okay. Could you repeat your question, please?
Okay, in this report and what you just put up before the jury, you say that at 1:30 a.m. he drank 3 to 6 Lime-A-Ritas, 12-ounce bottles, and then you further go and say he drank at 1:30, 135, 140, 145, 150, and 2. That's in this little printout we got today.
Yes.
Okay. Now, obviously, if he says he left the parking lot approximately, his best guess, 1 a.m., then he couldn't have been drinking Lime-A-Ritas at 1:30 to 2. Would you agree with that? if his life strength was in the parking lot.
We'd probably have to set all of these back half an hour or so.
Okay. And if the jury had seen a video of him being back at the dorm, not at the parking lot at 128 in Gillette Hall, then he clearly could not have been drinking these Lime-A-Ritas from 1:30 through to 2. Would you agree with that?
I don't know. Does he have a bottle with him?
Well, that would be up to the jury to see. But if he says his life strength was in the parking lot at 1 a.m. or approximately 1 a.m. and then he's on video being at his home dorm at 128, then he couldn't have been drinking Lime-A-Ritas unless he had them with him, I guess.
Or in his pocket, maybe, yes.
Oh, in his pocket. That would have been a 12-ounce bottle in his pocket. You think?
That's where I keep mine when I go hiking.
Okay. So if you could,
Water.
turn to page 1827, please, sir. And could you read line 3 through line 20?
1827?
I can read. You just read the answer, if you would. Question. Okay, I just want to make sure I understood that you testified about Lime-A-Ritas, that you had some of those, correct?
That's correct.
That's correct. All right, they come in 8-ounce cans, right? Yes, sir. Is that the response?
That's what he says.
Okay. And in what, an 8-pack or a 12-pack? I don't recall a pack. I know it's different amounts.
Mm-hmm.
He said, then the question, but that's all they come in is 8-ounce, so far as you know, correct? I think they sell them individually as well. Okay, but you're having a little 8-ounce cans, correct? We had 8-ounce, correct? And then we've been shared with several people, correct?
That's what he says.
So he clearly says it was an 8-ounce can Lime-A-Rita versus 12-ounce bottles, right? Under oath.
Apparently.
Okay. So that would change your calculations substantially, would it? Since that could be up to 24 ounces of Lime-A-Rita that wasn't consumed?
Yes, it would.
So that would substantially change your findings, would it not?
It would.
Okay. And I think you also, in your assumption, you said that you assume that the Lime-A-Ritas are 8% alcohol, is that correct?
Yes.
And are you aware that certain states have 6% Lime-A-Ritas and others have 8%?
My recollection is that at the time I inquired as to what would be available to him, and my recollection is that the response I got was 8%.
From who?
Let me see if it's in my file. It's not. I would say probably Dr. Walker or the attorneys.
He just hands you one. Purchased right here in Nashville.
to be no foundation laid for this either.
They can look at it and identify, you know, places
He
that's
can identify.
making all these assumptions.
I mean, it's,
But it was purchased this week, I'm assuming?
I can answer that question actually. I got it from www.budlight.com.
Okay. So you Googled
Yes,
while I'm reading.
yes. And I do know that it is available in 8 ounce and 12 ounce.
That's true. Mr. Batey testified under oath he was drinking 8-ounce limeade. Is that correct?
Yes, that is the 8 ounce.
Is that a 6% or an 8%?
This is 6%.
So that assumption could clearly be wrong. Is that correct?
Yes, if it's not the
Be marked that
8%.
exhibit to his testimony, Your Honor, please, since he identified.
all right.
What number is it? 34. Thanks.
The other subject that entered into evidence.
All right, I note your objection.
So it's fair to say, no fault of your own, but some of the information given to you and some of your assumptions were not totally correct, at least according to Mr. Batey under oath.
According to Mr. Batey, yes.
And that would substantially change some of the numbers.
Well, it would change it, certainly.
Okay. And you said one of them was as high as 40? What
Go
kills
back
you?
to that. That assumes 0.4, you mean?
0.40?
Yeah. That assumes the normal, essentially alcohol naive, alcohol kinetics, which means that he would have a low of 0.23 and a high of 0.4, given the high dose. Now, if that was wrong and it was the low dose, then we have the numbers for the low dose. That's assuming normal, it's 0.23. Assuming experienced, it's 0.21.
I was asking about 0.40. Would that be fatal?
No.
What is
Not-
fatal? Alcohol poisoning?
It depends how experienced you are.
Exactly.
0.7 is survivable to a chronic alcoholic. 0.5 will kill an alcohol naive person. Between those two, we have a range.
Okay.
But 0.4 is dangerously high.
Let's talk about blackout a little bit. I think the definition is amnesia for events of any part of a drinking episode without long continuance of drinking. It's characterized by memory impairment during intoxication and relative absence of other skill levels. So in other words, just like you said, I think that you can have a blackout but still be functioning pretty much. You're not passed out, is what I'm saying.
You're not passed out, right?
Okay.
But you are influenced.
And I think I talked to you earlier, and you said that you were familiar with the Journal of American Academy of Psychiatry and Law, and that's a well thought of medical journal. Is that correct?
Yes,
One that you follow and read yourself.
I do.
And I think you'd actually read. I can hand you this if you'd like, but you'd actually read this article yourself on blackout.
Your Honor, I've never seen the article before.
He thought it was presented earlier today.
It was referenced.
Okay. All
No
right.
one ever provided us a copy.
All right.
We would object to it being offered.
I can ask him about it if you want to
Yeah.
object to it.
As an expert, the state can ask, or the defense for that matter.
So, Doctor, in that particular article, it was research done by 2 PhDs and 2 medical doctor psychiatrists, is that correct, along with a research assistant?
Yes.
And they did numerous studies that had been done on this issue of alcoholic blackout in related to criminal behavior, is that correct?
Yes, what they did was a survey, a questionnaire.
And what they found was that this alcoholic blackout is very prevalent among criminal defendants, is it not? I think they found in the United States and Netherlands it's between 20 to 30% of offenders reported blackout during their crimes?
They're pretty common amongst alcohol abusers.
Okay. In another study reported by them, 80% of their sample of sex offenders reported blackout, alcoholic blackout.
That's what they say.
And there's another one where it's 30 to 40%. In another review that was done of defendants reported blackout during commission of crimes. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
And I think they say there on the first page, however, claiming an alcohol-induced blackout may also be an attractive strategy for minimizing legal responsibility for criminal behavior.
Your Honor, that's not even relevant.
What they say is a significant.
See what he answers. Okay, go ahead.
A significant percentage of students were engaged in a range of potentially hazardous activities during blackouts. Also, these blackouts were associated with lower academic grade point averages and other indicators of problem drinking. So yes, it is characteristic of people who are drinking problematically. And
But it's what they're saying in this whole article is very characteristic to Malinger, this, are they not?
Yes and no. What they're saying is that they believe it can serve a strategic function. But they are...
For defendants.
But their review, their literature review of dozens of papers, refers to actual blackout incidents, which is high among alcohol abusers, and alcohol abusers misbehave. They're drunk.
And these two medical doctors and PhDs say that although alcohol impairs short-term memory, which may interfere with storing information about ongoing behavior, remote memory remains intact. Thus, even during a blackout, a person would be perfectly able to retrieve rules of conduct and be aware of what he has done wrong. Yeah.
And be aware that what he is about to do is wrong.
Or has done.
No, it doesn't say has done wrong. It does not say that.
Oh, it doesn't? Okay.
No,
Maybe
because
I
he doesn't
misread.
have any memory for it.
What he is about to do is wrong.
Yes.
Okay. So basically saying even if you are actually in a blackout, you still know right from wrong.
You remember things that you can retrieve from long-term memory, things that you learned long ago. Those are not deleted. What is deleted is what is occurring anterograde under the influence of alcohol.
Now, you're saying a person can do relatively simple functions if they're under the influence of alcohol and even suffering a blackout. Is that correct?
They can do rehearsed functions very easily.
He asked you, do you think a person, Mr. Batey, at 2:05, if he was under an alcoholic blackout, could text nachos with extra ground beef, cheese, lettuce, and red salsa, and a quesadilla in a food order?
With spell check, yes.
He could do it with spell check.
Well,
so even though you're an alcoholic.
Whatever you're asking for, you're likely to get quesadilla if it starts with a Q.
Okay. So you're saying that he could do that he could function with.
If
It's
it
not
is,
her weakness, Your Honor. Please, I think Mr. Robinson ought to be the one that's objecting.
Your Honor, Mr.
Oh, let's step back for just one moment.
You don't look like Mike Jones, but for leave me alone.
do we have any more water? This thing is empty.
Chris, will you get Dr. Litman some water? Well, here, Larry, I'll go for a little. I'll go get some.
Or a bottle, whatever's convenient. Or a bottle, whatever's convenient.
Yeah, I mean, we're gonna make it as comfortable as possible. Really, we got to Is this your cup?
Yeah.
Put your stuff in there.
Well,
That's a good cup.
Well, Dr. Litman, about almost through, not to get back to East Tennessee, but do you think a person who's under the influence of that much alcohol could perform sexual acts and make decisions on how to do certain things to an
it
individual?
impairs sexual function, in males particularly erections. Things that are commonly done and routinely done that are muscle memory for can be done reliably whilst intoxicated and impaired. Doing something new, setting a new watch or whatever that you haven't used before would be impossible. But you have still the ability, as the article refers to by Orso, the ability to remember things that have previously been laid down in memory.
Okay, and would a person be able to dial the phone and talk conversation, long, lengthy conversation?
Dialing the phone could be a problem unless it came from the contacts list in a phone. Even remembering a new number would be a problem. If it's an established number, it wouldn't be a problem.
Okay. Now, you mentioned you were talking about date rape drugs.
Yes.
What? And certain date rape drugs now, manufacturers have put in a kind of a warning for people about date rape drugs. Is that correct?
Correct.
And what is that exactly?
The warning,
What do they do to allow people to know maybe there's a date rape been put in their drink?
there are two things. There's a bitterant, so that the drug tastes awful, and there's a blue.
I don't think it's relevant in this case. There's been no allegation of or suspicion of a date rape drug.
Well, I think he brought it up in his direct testimony.
He just was talking about how they work and used it slangily as a date rape drug. It was slang.
Slang?
There was no suggestion that there was a date rape drug used on Mr. Batey.
Oh, well.
So it's not relevant.
Well, I don't think that there is any suggestion about it being used on Mr. Batey, but the issue came up because Dr. Litman raised it in his direct testimony. And when he raises an issue, that opens the door for the other side to ask questions about it. It's just
And
basic.
may I ask how that becomes relevant? He mentioned benzos and alcohol, and also known as the date rape drug, and mentioned the drug. But
He's testified as an expert on date rape drugs. I think, based on his testimony, I think I've got a right to check his expertise.
it's not relevant in this case.
Well, it was raised in his direct testimony, and anytime that happens, the other side, whether it's you or the state, can cross-examine about his knowledge of that particular drug or any other drug that he raises in his testimony.
Doctor, are numerous date rape drugs turn blue when they're placed in a drink?
Yes, several of them do. The more recently introduced ones.
Okay. And I think we've had a case together before, a capital case where a person was charged with being a hitman and killing another person. You testified. And,
That's not relevant to this
I don't see what.
Well, I asked him the question about what he testified to about intent, Your Honor, please, which he clearly, his last question was on intent.
Okay,
Now,
if
just your
you're
question is
raising
like-
a question about intent, yes, you can.
That's not what he said.
In that particular case, you testified about your feelings about doing an intentional and knowing act. Is that correct?
Yes, in that context, the answer that I was given was in relation to a crime of specific intent,
Okay.
as defined in Tennessee law. And I said that I am not a lawyer, but that according to my understanding of the way that it is phrased, in order to completely lack any intent, one would have to be unconscious.
Okay. Basically, this was a premeditated murder, and you said for a person not to be able to do an intentional or knowing act, they would have to be unconscious, in your opinion. Although they can be impaired from alcohol or drugs, they would have to be unconscious not to do an intentional
To be
or knowing
completely
act.
incapable.
Right.
Your Honor, it's called for a legal conclusion of alcohol cases, and we haven't even gotten into that. That's what he's trying to slide that in. It's not relevant. It's
Okay,
not admissible.
okay, let's move on.
That was my last question, Your Honor.
All right. Redirect the examination.
Dr. Lippman, this survey that you were being asked about, that is, can you attest to the veracity of this article or the survey?
Can I attest to the veracity? I can say that it was peer-reviewed.
Okay. But it's not applicable in this case.
No, not directly.
Okay. And consuming 6 to 8 1.5 ounces of honey jack and 6 shots of vodka and 6 8-ounce Lamaritas, that's a can you describe what would happen based on the consumption of that amount of alcohol over a number of hours?
The correct way to do this is for me to calculate it,
Okay.
which I can't do here under these circumstances. But if you're saying the Limaritas actually have the least amount of alcohol, that's not a great deal of correction. What was the differential or discrepancy reported for the other?
I think the 6 to 8.
And he's leading, but he said he can't do it here. He has to have the calculations.
You have to rephrase your question.
Good. Under the hypothetically drinking 6 to 8 ounces of honey jack and 6 shots of vodka and 6 8-ounce Lamaritas over a 2.5-3 hour period, generally would that be a toxic amount of alcohol?
Yes, it's still way over the DUI level. I would expect to see him weaving, having trouble with balance. It's actually not that great a difference from what I am calling the low dose Widmark formula numbers.
And your testimony regarding the lowering of inhibitions, loss of impulse control and discontrol, would those factors change at all?
No, because he's still way above the DUI level. He's well within the range of intoxication.
And would this other amount of alcohol still be able to produce a blackout?
Based on these calculations, yes. It's still possible.
And would he still be subject to chemical submission?
Yes, his inhibitions would be eroded because he's quite high. He's quite above the level at which the frontal lobes are inhibited. He would still be likely impulsive. He would still likely be perseverative, and he's still within the range of being subject to suggestible manipulation. Those are not the highest dose effects. The highest dose effects are when you're knee-crawling drunk. But the more socially common ones are the ones that I have just described.
One second. That's all I have, Your Honor.
Article survey was it is a peer-reviewed article in a major medical journal, which is read by many people all over the world. Is that correct?
I think I might have even contributed to a peer review for this journal. I think I did.
And truth be known, you don't know what he had to drink that night, do you? There's no way for you to know that.
There's no, I don't have any objective. There wasn't a bartender keeping tabs.
Okay.
What I've tried to assist the court in doing is calculate a blood alcohol level based on the assumptions that I was asked to make, and explain what the range of possible answers are. Beyond that, I've tried to assist the court in understanding what those levels
No fault
do.
of your own what information you have, but if Mr. Batey is testifying truthfully under oath and the calculations in your report are not accurate, is that correct?
They're a little high.
That's all the question.
Read direct.
And under the different or hypothetical levels of consumption, I know you still said he would be subject to blackouts, which would also make him subject to
redirect about blackouts.
That is correct. It's outside the scope.
But the survey itself does not apply to Mr. Batey, in your opinion?
No. And I would add that when you speak of the number of the lime-maritas being too low, when I speak of 1.5 ounces for a shot, I have underestimated that.
Non-responsive, I think, Your Honor, please. I didn't ask anything about lime-maritas either.
Well,
I think it's just a clarification. Your Honor.
okay.
That's all I have.
All right, anything further?
No, Your Honor.
All right, thank you, Dr. Lippman.
Thank you.
You are excused. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, we're ending for the evening. My same admonition, do not discuss the case in any way with anyone, and have a good evening. I'll see you tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock.
All rise.
Again, I will check with everybody about 10 minutes to 9 tomorrow morning to see if there are any issues that are raised that we need to take up before we bring in the jury.
Your Honor, may I address two quick things?
I have to be somewhere. I really have to be somewhere.
Oh,
You can
okay,
bring it
well,
up tomorrow morning, but I have to be somewhere,
I asked about it today, so that's fine.
okay? I really do.
I understand.
I will resume in the morning
Yes, Your Honor.
between 8:50 a.m. and 9 a.m.
East. Could offer you a line ready to go when it's not cold.
Hey, I was told they come in like that 12 pack. Worked out on that.
Downstairs. And one time we got this, and the other time, the one I showed you yesterday actually was the number, this number.
You got the right
You
number?
can see.
You got the number?
So, really late stuff.